What's up, y'all? You're listening to the My Aggie Nation podcast. I'm Alex Miller, joined always by Robert Cessna. Cease, A&M's at the halfway point of the 2024 season. Let's take a moment to rewind. We'll grade the Aggies out, talk about some standout players and moments, and look ahead to what could be a promising home stretch if A&M can take care of business. I guess, just first of all, what's the first thing that comes to mind when somebody at church or at the store is going to stop you and say, Cease, what'd you think of the first 6 games of this A&M football season?
Well, just they bounced back from that loss. Number one, I think that was it, because after the Notre Dame game, a lot of questions. I don't think anybody was surprised that they lost that game, but I was a little bit surprised how negative a lot of people were at that point, because I think it just goes back to the past years. Nothing to do with this year's team, because A&M was favored in that game. And I think a lot of people drank the Kool-Aid and thought A&M was going to have a great season. And let's be honest, that was an ugly game in so many ways, and in both teams. I mean, it was a good ugly, but a bad ugly because of the expectations. So my number one deal is they put that behind with a 5-game winning streak, and particularly with the Missouri victory, I felt. But they put that behind, and that could have lingered.
Well,
what about you? Oh,
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think the thing that comes to mind is A&M's a much different team than they were from week 1 to week 6. After the Notre Dame game, it was like, man, there's some big question marks on this team. There's some good things about A&M, but can they overcome the question marks to put together a solid season? So far, they've found the ways to win games at Florida, against Arkansas. They beat the brakes off Missouri, and now you're looking at, holy cow, is A&M a playoff contender? We might be getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit at that point right now, but the point is, A&M controls its own destiny. This is not a position that A&M has been in very many times, and let's be honest, it's not an easy schedule, but it's an advantageous schedule, I think, toward the second half of the season.
here's the deal is, and I'll go back to, I'm old and cynical. I think this is the 7th team I've covered that started 5-1. And a reporter's deal is much different fans, because I look at where can I spend the bowl season. Is it going to be going in for one game and getting back, unfortunately driving, which is really bad, or am I going to get to go to Florida, have my luggage lost when I get there and be there long enough to get it? I mean, all these things factor into me as a reporter, and out of those 7 times starting 5-1, first 6, only 2 bowl destinations did I really say, like, I felt like I had a winning season.
Well, hey, if A&M plays well enough, they may not even go to a bowl for the first time. How about going to Happy Valley in December? I bet you wouldn't mind a trip home.
Well, that's true. I mean, without a doubt. Now, it gets a little bit cold, but once again that's why I'm a little cautious, because they've kind of been here before and not finished the deal.
Well, let's talk about the things they have done to this point. Let's just start with some grades. Let's start with the offense. See, so you're going to be writing your midseason grades in Saturday's paper. Right now, where are you kind of thinking you might be grading the Aggies out on offense?
I'm going to put a disclaimer here, because even though Alex told me yesterday to prepare for this, I was real busy yesterday about many irons in the fire, and Texas A&M football was on the lower level. I'm going to spend a lot of time studying tonight, so now I'm going to give you my gut grade before I go in. I would think at this point, on my gut reaction, be a C+, because I expected a lot more going in with Wegman, the running backs. I expected the offensive line to be better. I liked what I saw in the Missouri game, but I didn't like at times what I saw in the other games. So my gut reaction right now is C+.
I'm going to go with just a solid B, because I think the run game has been an A. The offensive line's probably been the biggest surprise of the season, and they have the SEC's leading rusher. Don't think I would have picked Le'Veon Moss to be the SEC's leading rusher starting out week 1. The passing game, though, I got to give a C at this point. It's been serviceable, but it hasn't been great. I think they showed flashes of what it could be down the stretch against Missouri if Wegman can continue to play at that level. Obviously, I think the Notre Dame game was by far his worst performance. Marcel Reed, let's give him a lot of credit because, I mean, he came in and did exactly what A&M needed him to do.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But I think when you average it out between an A and a C, you get a B, right?
Yeah.
I did learn some math in college.
I didn't learn a lot in college. Good places to go eat, who to hang out with, and things like that. But yeah.
How about the defense?
Defense, at this point, I would give them a B off the top of my head. I was disappointed. I thought they underachieved the first couple games in the run defense and a few other things. I expected a lot more out of that defense. Once again, being a teacher, it's a little bit, what do you expect out of your pupil? And I expected a lot out of the defensive pupil, particularly the D-line. Didn't see it at first. Once again, back end, very impressive against Arkansas and Missouri. So at this point, I would say a B with a big high scale that they really could go up to a big A.
I'm going to give them a B+. I think they're at like an 89.2 right now because here's the deal. They gave up the big plays against Notre Dame that lost them the game, right? Mm-hmm. They gave up the big plays that let Bowling Green hang in the game. But the way that they shut down Florida's run game, the way they shut down Arkansas in the second half, the way they shut down Missouri's passing game, I mean, I think the last 2 weeks you've graded the defense an A.
Oh, yeah.
And so the stock is rising and becoming, I think, what we expected the defense to be. But it's taken some time to get there, maybe a little longer than I would have anticipated and probably what a lot of Aggies had hoped it would be. But I'll give them a B+, and they're really encroaching on that A territory right now. Nick Scorton's numbers have just flown through the roof the last 2 weeks. I mean, I think he's doubled his sack total and tackle for loss total in the last 2 games alone and put the Arkansas game on ice.
Yeah, I got to admit, at the first few games, I wonder, okay, what's the deal? Because I said great in the maroon and white game, but he was going against a backup tackle. Everybody said, oh, this guy's going to be great, but I didn't see it the first few games. And what a great guy to talk to and whatever. And so everyone expected more. And once again, what's expected out of you? You know, it's a little bit like it's going to be tough for a rich man to go to heaven. And I thought Nick was a rich man as far as an All-American. And I go, he's not an All-American those first 2 games, but these last 2 games, he is an All-American.
How about special teams?
Oh, I got to give them a solid A. I mean, they have a few hiccups, and you want to be nitpicky. I thought Bussey would be more. We've seen in the return game, but that hasn't happened. Nothing. They're really giving up dangerously that bad. Maybe the one return, but man, the punter Tyler White. What a pleasant surprise. And I feel that Bond put those 2 misses behind at Florida. So when you look at the special teams, consistency, that's the one thing that A&M special teams has lacked under the Jimbo era. They would have flashes of greatness. They had Anaya Smith. I mean, for 3 years, you were one of the best punt returners in the country. And a lot of weeks, you had hiccups in the special teams.
It's almost like having a special teams coach does something for you.
They have one? Well, that's right. It's on the job description.
I'm going to give them an A, too. Look, in the past 2 years, A&M has lost a lot of games because of special teams, right? You think about missed field goals, blocked kicks, kickoff and punt returns for touchdowns, right? It puts A&M behind. It gives the team momentum, their opponent momentum in the second half down the stretch, right? Think about the Tennessee game. A&M had them on the ropes. They could have sent Ole Miss to overtime last year, missed a field goal, right? And that was the final straw for Jimbo, apparently. So, you know, the special teams, I feel like special teams is doing good when people aren't really talking about them. And then you have the highlight play where Tyler White, I don't even know how he does that, putting the ball at the half-yard line. And so for A&M to be able to have special teams consistent, like you said, and Tyler White's been really good with the field position. I mean, think about the Arkansas game, right? A&M won that field position battle throughout the middle quarters when both offenses were really just struggling to do anything, and at the end, A&M was able to prevail.
You laugh and you talk about going to Happy Valley. I don't care what happens. When you play good defense and you have a good kicking game, it travels. You can be competitive in a lot of ball games if you check those two boxes.
Who's been the best player for A&M so far this season, in your opinion?
I thought about that, and I don't put this in my grades. And I will go out there in left field because a lot of times I think I'm going to say Trey Zune, because I've ripped the offensive line like a lot of people did for 2 years, and everybody kept telling me about this guy Trey Zune was going to be good, great with the media. And then it turns out he was hurt 1 year. I think Jimbo did a misjustice. He was the best guy even hurt, but we didn't know he was hurt until the end.
Didn't know how hurt he was.
He was. And now we've seen this deal where week after week, Elko says the best offensive line guy is Trey Zune, and they judge him. Here's something you might not know. Elko's coaching staff's probably better than Pro Football Focus when it comes to grading people. Maybe, whatever. But I go with that, and I don't think Moss is leading the SEC in rushing if you don't have a good offensive line. You don't have people sacking. You mentioned about what Reed was able to come in. Offensive line protected him great. I don't know how good those other guys are, but I know that Zune, every week, they praise him, and we've seen him before. If you don't have an offensive line, you might not have a football team.
I'll go on the other side of the ball then, and I think it's getting a little cold in here. I might need a blanket. I'm going to go with Will Lee. Look, Elko overhauled the secondary through the transfer portal over the offseason when he got here, and the blanket has lived up to his name. And no more impressive than last week against Missouri when they really held that potent passing attack to just about nothing.
Funny, because we'll show how good he is, because I think you was saying for a surprising player. I put him down as my surprising player because I didn't know how good he was going to be. I heard how good he was going to be. These guys that transferred in that are not All-Americans or whatever, you never know how they're going to fit in, whatever. And when he came in and talked to us, he was really funny. And you go, man, let's hope this guy is good. And he's really good. And I could see how you pick him as the MVP because A&M has struggled so much before. You talk about the big plays. A&M just consistently under the Jimbo era. The wheel wasn't covered, got tight end running free down the middle, nobody on him. Whoever Will Lee is on, they're going to have to work real hard. So, he could be the defensive MVP. He could be the overall MVP. He could be the most surprising player. He could probably be the best interview, too.
Absolutely. we have definitely enjoyed talking to Will Lee. I'll throw a couple for surprise player. We've already talked about one, Le'Veon Moss. When Reuben Owens went down, A&M still had 3 scholarship running backs, but you're kind of looking at that room going, okay, who's going to emerge from this group? Like Moss and Daniels had shown flashes in the past of what they could do, but not on a consistent high level. E.J. Smith is a guy that, he had a couple moments at Stanford, but never really was like the guy. And Le'Veon Moss has, the comfortability over the last 3 weeks, it seems like, has just gone through the roof. The way he finished that second half against Arkansas, the way he ran against Missouri, and it's all predicated by what you said with the offensive line led by Trey Zune, but A&M's ability to have that steady rusher has been huge. A&M hasn't had a guy run like this since Travion Williams did back in 2018.
And I think we've got to create a unsung hero category because I didn't know if Marcel Reed or Jalen Henderson was the backup quarterback. And you think about how the situation with Wegman struggling so bad in Notre Dame and then having the injury, Wegman gets no awards halfway through the season because he doesn't have enough qualification, but yet A&M's 5-1 and ranked number 15 in the country. So I think you've got to give Marcel Reed some kind of award for where he's at. So that, to me, it's definitely unsung hero because I didn't know. It was great last year, the Texas Bowl. Oh, man, this guy might be good. But, it's just one game, and it's a bowl game, and you got an interim staff. But for him to do what he did in his 3 starts, A&M's not 5-1 without him.
He's kind of been their 12th man this season.
Oh, wow. Hey, how about E.J. Gill Award? Wasn't that guy's name?
E. King Gill.
E. King Gill, whatever. He knows what his name is.
Oh, man. The other guy I was going to say, Albert Regis, they've talked about him quite a bit. And, you know, he does a lot of dirty work at defensive tackle, really big guy. You know, coming into the season, you know, he's been a guy that's been here. I think a lot of people were expecting DJ Hicks to line up next to Shamar Turner, being A&M's other starting defensive tackle. And Hicks has gotten in and played quite a few snaps. But, I mean, Regis, he just has been tearing it up this season.
How about Albert Regis? When they had the block punt, they put him in to be one of the up backs. He takes care of problems because he's such a straightforward guy.
He needs to do commercials one day. He's got the voice for it.
Yeah,
or like audiobooks. He'd be great at audiobooks.
That's not even close, but you need to listen to Albert Regis talk because you kind of get mesmerized. We want to keep asking him questions at 2 times. Well, you guys, you know.
Well, he's very well articulated.
Great.
He thinks about what he's saying.
Yeah.
I mean, incredible interview. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked a little bit.
I will say this year is some of the best interviews. When you think about Lee, Scorton, whatever, the hits keep Wegman out, how he faced us after the bad game. Once again, you don't want to compare apples and oranges, but just the guys that have come in, a lot of good talkers.
Marcel Reed's one of them too.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey,
Hey,
biggest moment through the first 6 games of the season. What's been a defining moment for you for this A&M team?
the way they handle Missouri. I mean, to me, that was the first big test, and everybody said, "Oh, you got to go to Florida," and Florida wasn't that good, and they're still not that good. And coming back after the loss, you play McNeese, like who cares and whatever. No, Missouri was the first one. We're like, okay, how good is this team? Because they flunked Notre Dame. It was like, okay, big F, big red F. You know, you got to play better than that. Even Notre Dame didn't play that well when you stop and think about it. But Missouri.
I'm going to go the 99-yard touchdown drive against Florida.
That was big.
Because that, to me, was the moment when the offense really grasped its identity, particularly the offensive line. I mean, the way they just manhandled Florida all the way down the field. It's pouring rain. You're on the road. You're just running the ball right down their throat. I mean, that was some big boy football right there. And Florida didn't stand a chance stopping A&M in that moment. And I feel like you've seen the offense and this offensive line carry that momentum forward from that moment. And if that's similar to how A&M's going to play the rest of the season, this offense is probably going to find more success than it will failure.
And, we're hopping around and if another unsung guy to me has got to be the center because they start out with Mark Naboo and he goes down. And once again I'll quote Mike Elko deal. He's seen 1,070 snaps. We've only seen 70. Well, Naboo was the best center going out, and then he goes down, and they have to put a backup in. Now, he was the guy they brought from Hawaii, and I'll butcher his name like
Utah, Cooley,
whatever. Cooley, him too. But the fact is, I don't know how great he is. He hasn't been offensive lineman of the week or whatever, but once again we've seen before A&M lose one offensive lineman, it seems like, the dam burst. So he's come in and obviously done a credible job. I'd maybe just give him 1 star. They do the stars on the helmet. He deserves a star.
Well, and then, he kind of got dinged up against Florida. They had to put Shanahan in. I mean, they're on 3rd-string center, and then Shanahan gets hurt again, and they have to go back to Coley.
They need to give him
And Shanahan hadn't been back. Well, he's probably going to be back next week. But
they need to give him an ID so he knows who he is or whatever, something along those lines. Because, he had some off-the-field problems, but he didn't let that bother him. And, I always love, and Cease makes jokes about everything. I don't have any problem with a coach saying they'll handle a problem internally long as they handle that problem internally. And so, once again, he had a problem. He was out. He stepped up. He was Gill when they needed him. So, I don't have any problem. I don't want to see your name anymore off the field.
Well, There's a lot of football left to be
Lot.
played. A lot of big games, not even just the one at the end of the season. What's the most important game going forward for A&M?
Right now is I'd put LSU because I think they're going to win Mississippi State. They're going to have 2 weeks of hype. This week's a bye. Kids going to go home. They're going to be at their high school football game. Everybody's going to be a hero. You're a 5-1 team, 15 in the country. Going to come back. Going to beat Mississippi State, maybe 13 in the country. Who knows? Then you come home and play LSU. They've owned LSU the last few years here. Haven't done well down there. Get by LSU. You can look forward to Texas. Yeah, you still got to go to South Carolina and all that, but Texas is going to stand alone on itself. But if you would stub your toe against LSU, there goes the outside hope of being in the college football playoff, because even if you come back and beat Texas, too many people are going to be ahead of you with a 2-loss team. And I'm not saying this is or should be a college football playoff. It's how long can you keep going? How long can you keep building momentum? This is a great first half. They beat LSU. I think they'll have a great second half.
Well, and, Elko on Monday said, the longer you win and have your goals in front of you, the longer you have your team's attention span.
And fans happy.
And fans, and I mean, that just goes so far, right? I mean, how many times have we sat here in the middle of the season on the bye week talking about, well, A&M's 4-2, they're 4-3. Like, can they not go to the Texas Bowl? Can they go somewhere else?
Yep.
And for once, A&M's got everything in front of them, and now they just need to not do what A&M teams have done in the past to get to where they'd like to go.
Keep it in front of them and keep getting closer and closer to something bigger. And LSU is going to have a good team, win or lose this week at Ole Miss. We'll all watch that game.
Mississippi State. Oh, LSU. Sorry,
LSU plays.
I thought
Ole
you were
Miss.
talking about A&M.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That
Yeah. We're on different pages. Yeah, I'm going to watch that LSU Ole Miss game because
who'd you pick in Prague?
I picked Ole Miss.
I picked Ole Miss too.
I've got mixed emotions because I do always like to see the A&M opponents win because it makes the game bigger. And sometimes, especially they get beat down, and you beat a team everybody else beats. Who cares? I mean, it's like if Ole Miss loses to LSU, then they're really out of the college football race at 2 losses. Then if you're A&M, then you beat LSU. You put 2 more teams behind your back, and then you are already putting Missouri behind you. I mean, then you can really start getting excited. What he talked about.
My biggest game for A&M is South Carolina, because one of 2 things is going to happen at the LSU game. A&M's going to get a big win, and they'll be in the top 10, or they're going to lose, and now your hopes of making the playoff are really thin, right? And Elko talks about the attention, right? Mm-hmm. If we've already heard from a couple players, the hardest place they've played is at South Carolina.
Without a doubt.
And South Carolina, that game's going to be at night. We know it's going to be rowdy. And so if A&M's going in there with a chance, they got to take care of business if they beat LSU. But if they lose, where's the focus of the team, right? Can they keep it together? Can they not let it slide like they did in 2016 or in some of these other seasons where they had hope and then they lost it, like 21, right? They beat Alabama, they got everything in front of them, and then they lose some of those games that really cost them down the stretch. So like Ole Miss and LSU, right? Mm-hmm. And so that to me is the biggest game. And then I think you said it, the Texas game speaks for itself. We don't even need to mention that one because everybody knows.
And when A&M lost that game at South Carolina, their only loss there, a kickoff return for a touchdown put A&M behind the 8 ball, and they never climbed out of that because special teams wasn't that good. Connor Wegman almost brought them back. But once again, if they keep playing special teams well, they keep playing good defense, they can beat anyone. And it's good to go on the road because your offense is going to struggle sometimes on the road because the fans, the crowd, quarterback might not have his best game. I don't care how good offense. We saw Ole Miss lose at Kentucky. They just shut it down. But now Ole Miss is starting to concentrate on their defense as well. A&M's a good spot, and a lot of times at the halfway point, we haven't been able to say that.
Well, I think that's all we're going to say today. So be sure to check theeagle.com for all of our coverage on A&M football and other sports as the Aggies hit the home stretch of the season. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. We'll see you next week on the My Aggie Nation podcast.